Hello and welcome to Fire in the Belly. Today we have myself, Mighty Pete, and we have the Rae Harbuck. Good afternoon, good morning to you.
Yes, it is morning to me. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, it's great to have you back. So Rae has been on before, so it's wonderful to have you back on. But this time you are bringing a little accessory with you. You have published a book.
Yes.
Welcome. So we have the book here. So it's really to give it a proper title. So to be a chair, when I grow up, I want to be a chair. So a memoir by Rae Harbuck. So listen, welcome. And I've just started reading it and going through it. So I'm delighted to have it here, and welcome on being a published author. So how's it been?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's publishing a memoir is a really interesting way of living because all of a sudden, you have all these stories that you've now offered to the world, and there's no limit to who will read it, and which is like equal parts really wonderful and tremendously scary as well.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I mean, I suppose having it out there is a bit like a child as well, but they've left the nest in their way to fend for themselves now. It's great. You're creating ripples all over the world, So
Yeah.
tell us, what was the book about? What's the intention here, and what were you wanting to get across?
Yeah. So, well, let me start by saying that when I first started writing this, I didn't really um, give it a dimension. It was like I just started writing stories down, and I started writing it about 15 years ago, actually. And I think I was in the point of my life where I was realizing that I had all these stories that I kept sharing with my students, my swimmers, peers. And so I just started writing those down. And really, I think a lot of it was in a way for me to sort of process the things that had happened to me over the course of my life, and to really sort of get rid of some of pain that I was holding on to and struggle. And so it was almost like a way of journaling at first. And so over the course of the last dozen plus years, I started getting a little bit more serious about like, hey, I have like 20 some odd chapters here of stories. And I really think that I want the world to know about it. And so once I actually started to think about turning it into a book, it was wild because when I sat down and wrote it initially, I didn't write it chronologically. I wrote it based on, the lesson that needed to be learned that day, or how I was feeling, or, similar themes. And so when I actually wanted to put it together into a real live book, I had to take all the chapter titles and write them on sticky notes, and then sit there with like a whiteboard and try to figure out where they all went in my life, which was a really interesting experience in and of itself. And there are actually some chapters that aren't completely chronological, but they fit for one reason or another. But so once I really got serious about it, then I actually had to go back through a lot of the stories, and it was like, oh my gosh, that's the worst thing I've ever written. And it was because it was all just like just me needing to get stuff out. So much of this book just kind of like fell out of me. But then, to make it something that somebody would want to read, I had to go back and add dialogue and setting and more descriptions of things, and make sure that, people flow from one story to the next and things like that. But it wasn't until I was pregnant with my second child, who is now 3, that's when I got really serious about it. And, for those who are listening that are parents out there, especially mothers, when you have a kid, you lose a little bit of yourself, and there's nothing wrong about that. There's nothing sad about that. It just happens. And I knew going into having a second child that there was going to be even more of that notion of kind of losing a bit of myself. And so I really wanted to kind of fast forward, get this thing out into the world, because I realized that it was something that I was really impassioned by. And it's funny because now my child is 3 and the book just came out a few months ago. And so it still took me that much longer to get it out there. But it became very, very important to me. And I think it became so important to me that I didn't actually let myself think about it too much, because I think I would have freaked myself out and not let myself do it, or what have you. Because a memoir is your deepest, darkest secrets on paper for the world and forever. And I didn't think about that going into it. I mean, it sounds like so naive and so silly of me, but I didn't think about the PTO mom reading my book, or the mailman, or like all these random people that I know but don't know. And they now all know everything about me when it comes down to it.
It's just fascinating, isn't it? I mean, it's a real to get it out there, as you say, because I mean, I take it whenever you're journaling, whenever you're writing, they were never supposed to be public. They weren't supposed to be out there. They weren't supposed to be, that was your thoughts and your thoughts only, right? So
right,
you're just keeping it for prosperity. But then, what was the flip moment that then said, "Now's the time"?
Well, I think being pregnant with my second child, that's what gave me more motivation to do it. But I think once I started to put the stories together, actually, and really look at them holistically, and look at them, trying to look at them from a different lens. So not just my regurgitation journal that I created, but actually look at it for, what somebody else might see out of it. And I realized that there were a lot of common themes that sort of strung throughout each of my stories, and things that to me became really, really powerful and really, really meaningful. I think one of the overarching themes that I didn't realize until I actually did this process and put it all together was that there have been a lot of moments in my life where I have felt extremely vulnerable and challenged, and felt like I had things taken away from me. And those moments were also the moments where I had the most strength, and really became a better version of myself. And in realizing that, like that's something that I think that is a very universal thing. I think everybody, can relate to that feeling of being really vulnerable, but it's really what you do with that moment that really sort of dictates what that experience really is for you. And it can really turn it to be one of the most positive things. And I didn't know that going through these things, and I didn't know that even afterwards until I put this entire manuscript together. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is like such a revelation. And also like the simplest thing ever. You endure these moments, but you think that they're tragic or flawed or whatever, but they're the most beautiful parts of your life, and they're the things that are showing you that you're living, and showing you that you are somebody that can do it.
What I mean, how do you? Has it changed the way you feel about yourself? It's maybe a bit of a strange question, but
It's kind of no, it's yeah, because I think that I have fought really, really hard my entire life to be the most normal, mundane, bored person, not bored, boring, because I think that so many times in my life I have been told otherwise, like, oh, you're so extraordinary, you're so remarkable, you're so inspirational. And those moments, like, it sounds so silly because, like, of course those are compliments, of course those are wonderful things to be called, and I should be like really proud of myself. But I've been called that getting out of the car, or like putting my pants on, things and so, because using a wheelchair, being paralyzed, it's really easy for somebody to say like, oh, you're so inspirational. And for me to almost take that in a negative light and be like, because I walked across the street, like, or, what is the deal? And so I think that having my book and sort of putting all of these things together, and then, being able to talk to people about it, because that's one of the things that my book has done, is it's actually opened doors for me to really talk more about not only my stories, but just like sort of what I've learned through it all. And darn it, maybe I am a little bit different, and and that's going to be okay.
I mean, it's amazing. And I, just as you were speaking there, I was thinking, other people finding it inspirational, it's contrast for them, really, isn't it? As you say, it's not, for them, for you to see you and to view what you're doing is a huge contrast. Whereas for you, when you're day to day, it's like we can't see the changes because
Mhm.
we're living it, right? And it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just have to get on. I just have to do, right? So
Mhm.
it's, yeah, it's both. It's huge for them, and it is for you too. But also then it's nothing, because it's going, I'm just doing what I have to do
Right.
and surviving and getting on with the world, right? It's yeah.
One of my favorite chapters in my book, I always, the title of it is so convoluted, and so I always mess it up, but it's all about acceptance. And so it's a recipe for the acceptance of myself and others' acceptance of accepting me, or something like that. I think it's like the fourth chapter. Um, but it's one of my favorites because I kind of wrote it as like a silly recipe, but it tells a lot about how, in order for me to accept myself, I also have to accept how others view me. And and it's not bad that I have to accept that. And acceptance itself isn't a bad thing. It's actually a very beautiful thing, because it does a lot for your understanding and sort of uh, relations with other people, and in your own self too.
I love that. And I've pulled out a bit I was reading there in the first chapter, and it was saying, you talk about that as the 16-year-old self essentially coming out, and saying, little did I know I was learning so much about how self-confidence and true sense of self is really the key to being cool right there and then. My insecurities and vulnerabilities were electric, but deep down I was learning how to be the real kind of cool for myself. And that's so different. It's an inner cool as opposed to an outer cool. And I just thought that really reflected what you were saying there. It's just, it's getting true to you, right? No matter
Right.
what journey.
Yeah, and I think that, so for the listeners, I was paralyzed in a car accident when I was 16, and that's sort of what is being talked about in my first chapter. And I think that because of that um, accident, and because of being kind of like a teenager, naive, and wanting to just be like everybody else, I mean, I think that was a real fast and hard lesson for me to realize that, like, I'm going to have to be me, period. And I can't, there's a segment in my book that I talk about how, going back to school, the biggest issue that I had was, how am I going to carry my backpack being in a wheelchair? And how that was such like a hard thing for me to try to navigate. And that was the thing that I was really hyper focused on, because all I wanted to do was be like everybody else. And I think that, nobody does themselves any service being like that and trying to be like everybody else. And that's just sort of the nature of being a teenager, and trying to like find yourself. And eventually I think everybody, or at least most people do, they find their own paths, and they become more true to themselves. And I think that accident was sort of just like the catalyst for me to just like, suck it up. You have to be your own person. Like, you can't be like everybody else. It's not going to work. Like, if you can't join your friends walking up this flight of stairs, like, you're not going to do that. And so you're going to have to find another way. And so I think that I learned a lot of really powerful and meaningful lessons really early on that that really gave me, my own breath and gave me really my own way of doing things, and it made it okay.
Out of interest, I mean, where are you with the universe in terms of justifying how or why it happened? I mean,
So, yeah, I've always sort of taken the belief that everything happens for a reason. And I think that I sort of developed that belief really early on because it was a way of coping and it was a way of rationalizing, because otherwise I could have very easily gone to the like, why me, or what did I do to deserve this? And so just sort of in my own teenage brain saying, well, it happened because it was going to happen no matter what, and it was meant to happen. And it was just a way for me to be like, okay, done. Well, let's move on. Let's just live this life. And I've kind of carried that belief system through me all of my life and all of the things that have happened. And I think that it has, whether it's true or not, it has served me. It has served me because it has allowed me to move forward in everything.
is that not a huge reflection? I mean, there's people who have maybe been through or have far less limitations as such, and I mean that positively, but yet they never get over them. They never get, it
Yeah.
complete, it disables them in one way, but also mentally disables them, right? So it's both,
Mhm.
which is a double tragedy almost.
Yes, absolutely. And I really think that I figured that out when I was a teenager. I figured it out that like if I want to be able to go hang out at the mall with my friends, then I just need to do that and not worry about, am I going to be able to push up that ramp, or am I going to be able to get in that door? Or, and, if I want to go and be that normal kid, then I'm going to be that normal kid. And something else that I learned is that it's kind of, for better or for worse, it was going to be my job to tell the world that I was okay, and let everybody know that I was okay, and that you don't need to treat me differently. You don't need to worry about me. And I think that's, I probably learned that, just a couple years after my accident while I was in college. And just kind of telling the world, this new college world that didn't really know me, didn't know my accident, that like, I'm okay. I'm just like you. I'm just sitting in a chair. Um, and that really, it was the truth that really helped, because as soon as I, let somebody know, a stranger or an acquaintance, as soon, and then it wasn't letting them know, being like, hello, I'm a normal person, but just showing them that I could do the things that they could do, or I could, crack a joke, or make a mistake, and just show them that I'm human. The more that I could do that, the more that's how I would be received. And that goes back to that acceptance part too, sort of accepting myself to be able to accept everybody else as well.
When did you find that you were able to get on with it more than those around you, more or less?
Absolutely. And I think some of that, comes down to when something tragic happens to somebody you love and you watch somebody suffer. That's really, really hard. I would consider that to be one of the most grueling parts of life, is like watching somebody that you love suffer or go through something traumatic. But when something happens to you, it's almost like you have control over that, because you have control over how you react to it and what you do from it. And so it's not as bad. And so in speaking to my accident wasn't that bad for me, because I wanted to go to the mall with my friends. And so I just figured out what to do next. Whereas I'm sure with my family and my friends, I mean, some things that I never ever considered. when, I would say about a month ago, I had a group of kids from my high school, and they say kids, they're in their 40s now too. Um, on Facebook, they all went and bought my book, and they were having this big discussion about it. And this is kind of, I'm jumping around, but the point is I was reading through this thread that they were all commenting about my book, and commenting about, I remember going to school on Monday, and she sat next to me and her seat was empty. And and I feel really bad about, I never thought about that. I never thought about, the kids sitting in the classroom that I was supposed to be in that day after my accident. I never thought about, the impression that that must have left on, even the slightest of person in my life.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? It's like everyone's sort of focused on the person that it's happened to, but yet, I mean, as you said earlier on, I mean, it's like, ask a parent, when the child gets hurt, the parent hurts, there's no doubt about it. And we will do whatever it takes. In fact, we probably hurt more than the child possibly, in the mental sense anyway.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all for you then. I mean, going through, so the process really of extracting it, and what was it, a rewrite for you, or did you use your notes and your journaling as almost an aid, a memoir, to remember, or was it a case of taking those words and actually then adapting them into, sewing in the stories, making it readable, etc.? What was the process for you?
Well, as I mentioned, it took me about 15 years. And so um, some of what's really fun and interesting about that is some of the stories then changed. I had ideas of, okay, well, this next part is going to be this chapter, this chapter, this chapter. But then I met my husband, and then I had a baby. And so then things changed for the rest of that book, which was really neat. And then also, because it had taken me so long to write it, as I started to go through to edit, there were stories that I didn't even remember. And I'm so glad that I wrote them, because they were very impactful, obviously, at the time. And, and then it was like, oh yeah, that did happen. Oh, wow. There were even stories that I wrote that I had to question whether or not they, like, did that really happen to me? Oh, that's terrible. Or, and, I like wish everybody could have the opportunity to sit down and write their story, because I think that it is so profound. The things that are in your own brain that you don't always let yourself sort of unleash or process or create even. And through the course of the last whatever years, I was able to really just like let all of this stuff out, and give it space, and foster it, and also like make peace with a lot of the things that had happened to me, or the things that I didn't quite understand, but then through writing about them, now I do. I mean, it's just fascinating. And I really wish that people took more time to do that for themselves.
I mean, what was there a healing? Was it a cathartic process that you kind of needed to go through anyway, or had a lot of that actually happened in advance, and this was essentially an editorial, if you like? This was, just telling the story as it was.
I think that I think it was absolutely cathartic, and it was more cathartic than I knew at the time. As I said, I don't remember why I started writing or for what reason, but it was clear. And looking back on those stories that I was writing at that time, it was clear that those things needed to come out. They needed a home that was not me, and then it enabled me to really look at the root of those events, or those lessons, and really sort of figure out what purpose did they have in my life now, or how did they actually, how did that vulnerability serve me when I was 16, kinds of things.
Is it funny? I mean, sort of 16 is such a transition phase, right, of anyone's life, of sort of from sort of independence to dependence in many ways, I suppose. It's you know, I mean, it's maybe an impossible question, but it's that age. Do you think that was a good age, bad age? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a crazy question. I don't know. Is it the fact that we're quite moldable still at that age? Do you think that helps, or do you think it slowed you down?
No, so I absolutely think that my age really, really helped me to sort of, I wouldn't say get over my accident or my paralysis, but it really helped me. When you're 16, like you said, you're sort of impressionable. You're sort of, I was still very naive to the world. You think I was a kid, and you look at kids, and kids they don't dwell on things that have happened. They don't look in the past and try to sit with it or wonder why. They just go and they move forward. And kids have a much better sense at looking at the positive side of things. And I think that my age absolutely helped me at that point. I mean, I truly remember all I wanted to do. I'm sitting in my very first wheelchair, and they're trying to teach me how to push it. And I'm just wondering, how do I sit in a movie theater seat? And it's like, okay, well, teach me how to do that then. And so it didn't, I never like sat with oh, I can't move my legs, and I'm never going to be like anybody else, and no one's going to love me. It wasn't like that. It was just like, I want to go see this new movie that's out. So teach me how to get in this chair.
Where did that drive, that passion, that sort of get up and go? I mean, where does that come from? I mean, is that from your parents or other people? Or
I often wonder that. And I think some of it might be growing up an athlete. I was always a swimmer, and as a swimmer or as any sort of athlete, you learn to practice. And when you practice, you get better. And so I think that there was just sort of that ingrown sense of being athletic and understanding that, okay, well, if I practice going up this hill 9 times, I'll get better at it. And so then I will. And so I think that the simplicity of practice really did help me be able to do the things I wanted to again. I mean, when I was first injured, and once I was, and it took me about 2 months to actually be able to sit in a wheelchair because I had a lot of injuries. But once I did, I had wheelchair class. I had to actually have class to learn how to open doors and go down hills and, grab things from high shelves, things like that. And those all became, that was my sport at the time. And then that's sort of how I, compartmentalized what I was going to do. It's like, oh, well, here's my class, and I'm going to learn how to be better at this, and that's cool. And so I will.
Would you be slightly competitive by chance?
Oh gosh, I've always been very competitive. I'm still very competitive. And I mean, even with my book, I want to win this book game, and I don't know how to, but I just want, I'm constantly looking at how many books I've sold, and it's like, I want to win this game, and nobody can tell me how to do it.
Yeah, it's a weird world, isn't it? Right? You don't know the scale, you don't know the rules, and what's right,
Right,
and wrong.
right. Am I winning? Am I losing? What's happening?
Yeah, it's I mean, who do you think is going to benefit from your book? I mean, who do you think, who's your avatar, if you like?
Yeah. So originally kind of going into the publishing process, and I was, working with a couple editors, and um, they suggested, that probably the target demographic would be a woman in her, 30s to 50s, and likes to be athletic, but also is probably a mom. And so that was sort of like the notion that I originally went with. But since my book has come out, I've been very, very surprised at the amount of teenagers that have picked up my book and have really found something within it. And also, I had a couple of other people that use wheelchairs, that was something that I wasn't sure about, if somebody that also uses a wheelchair would enjoy my book or really hate my book. And I had one woman for instance, she picked up my book. She's a wheelchair user, but from a neurologic Lyme disease. And she would write me little messages as she was reading the book. And it was so wonderful to hear her take as a wheelchair user, but also, I mean, she has something completely different. She didn't have a car accident. She didn't, but she really, really connected with a lot of just like basic things about being a wheelchair user, and sort of like surrendering some of your independence and asking for help and things like that. And also just like being scared about your health and stuff like that. But she really, really connected with it. And that was really, really special to me, because I wasn't quite sure how, certain demographics, like, just somebody else that uses a wheelchair, they may look at me and be like, well, you're not doing this right. You don't know what you're talking about. Why are you saying this? Or, and I've had a handful of men pick up my book and find things about it that they really connect with. And just I guess it's in the feedback so far, my book has appeared to be a lot more universal than I may have considered it, which is kind of cool.
I find that quite funny that, it's almost like, am I qualified to be a wheelchair user? Am I going to get am I going to get caught out by other wheelchair users that I'm
Right.
not doing it right? It's like, God, it's like putting your neck on the line, right? Saying, yeah, this is my journey. It's like all this time I've been using my wheelchair backwards or something crazy, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I know. That was the fear.
I mean, what other fears were there in putting this out? Because I mean, it is like, as you said, it's a heart on the sleeve. I mean, it is obviously, I'm going to say it's a triumph. Is it a triumph? The fact that where you've got to and all the things you've achieved. Do you see it that way? And
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I touched on before, like when I started writing it, I started writing about things that were painful to me or struggles that I needed to get out. And so I would suggest that a lot of my book is about those types of things. They're not necessarily about all the really fun, cool things. And so some of the people that are in my life, I think, have struggled with, well, why did you write about this? Well, why didn't you write about these really fun times that we had? And he's like, well, those didn't need to be written, and so I think I think it's been really good for my family, and I think it's been really hard for my family in the same way. As you read through my book, you'll learn that my family and I have a very hard time communicating. And so my book was sort of like this really big neon sign of communication all in one fell swoop. And so I think that that's been a little bit difficult for everybody to swallow, even myself, to try to even talk to my family about the things that are in my book, even though the entire world could read about them. It's still hard for me to talk to my family about. And I have a couple early on friendships when I'm in high school. And there's a chapter about two of my friends that think that they're being funny, and they put an open tuna can in my car, and how devastating that was to me at that point. And I just recently reconnected with one of the girls that did that, and she swears up and down that she was like, I don't even remember doing that to you, but why did you write about that? And why didn't you write about all these really fun moments that we had? And I didn't see our friendship that way. And it was like, yeah, that wasn't the sum of our friendship, but that was the thing that needed to get out of my body. It needed to get out of my brain. And it obviously left an imprint. And not that was the only moment that my brain has with you, but that was the one that sort of ignited me to move forward.
Mm. But that's perspective, right? Isn't it? I mean, it is just that, and it's the perspective of your journey and their journey. It's like someone said, why didn't you write about something else? And it's like, well, but this is what meant to me, and that's your personal experience, and it has an effect, neither good or bad or whatever, right? So it's funny how other people make it about them. Why couldn't you say
Yeah.
something different, right?
Yeah, and that's I've tried really hard to show the people that are closest to me that like these are my stories, and they are my reality. It doesn't mean that it's your reality. And I really enjoy the creative part of my journey, and there may be things that I had to make a little bit more colorful for them to actually be interesting to the reader, and that's okay. And I put that pretty much as a disclaimer in the front of my book, that this is a creative interpretation of my life. And I for whatever reason, if my like biggest goal is for somebody somewhere in the world to pick up my book and read it and just think it's a really great piece of fiction. Like I don't necessarily want it to be true. I don't necessarily want it to be my story. I just want it to be a good story, and I want it to be well written.
Mm. No, absolutely. It's funny you were saying about your parents there, and I noticed that from your dedications at the start, at how subtle and how gentle you were with, specifically with your mom and your dad, and so saying, I wrote about the things I needed to get out, which you said, and the ones that held pain, and that's the thing, is saying, listen, I'm doing this almost selfishly, but I mean that in a very positive way, and saying I'm doing what is right for me, and then if I do what's right for me, then that's right for everyone.
Mhm.
But we could also perceive that to be, why couldn't you have done something else? And saying, well, I've done what's right for me, and I take my hat off to you for doing that, and being true to it. Because it's not always the easiest journey, right?
No, it's not. It's not. And actually, as an example, my best friend lives in Germany, and she's in my book a lot. And for whatever reason, I never let her read any piece of it until it came out. And she, of course, right away ordered like 10 copies. She's wonderful. But anyways, she went through my book really, really quickly, and she called me on the phone and she said, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe how brave you are." And that was the first thing that she said. And that kind of stuck with me, and because it was like, wait, what? Did you like what I wrote? Like, like, what do you mean help it? And that was like the first moment where I really kind of sat with my book and sat with like, oh, I see what you're saying. I did write about a lot of things that, are very intimate things, or very scary things for me to put out in the universe. And like I said, like I didn't give myself the opportunity to think of it too much ahead of time, because I think I may have chickened out. And and so when she called me brave, it was kind of like, oh, I guess I could see that.
Was there ever a moment when you were sort of like, how can I get all the copies back?
Yeah, I mean, it's yes and no, because I know that this book needed to be made, and it needed to come out there into the world, because I no matter what, even with the things in there that I feel kind of icky sticky about, I feel like it's the right thing, 100%. And I, and maybe this is part of my competitiveness of needing to win the book game, but I want people to read it. I want everybody to read it. And, it's funny because I sit there on my little like Amazon account and I refresh how many people have bought my book, but I haven't ever refreshed how much money I've made. because that doesn't matter. What matters is I want people to have my book.
I don't know about you, but I found the Amazon statistics are terrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like I have no idea what's doing. It's like I know people have bought the book, and then it's, you know, the reports aren't showing me this and all the rest. So just to any would-be authors there, it's like it's not exactly, the statistics wouldn't exactly be brilliant. So
Right. And then, well, for whatever reason, I'm a very like numbers centered person. And so I'm constantly looking at those numbers and then looking at my rankings, and those don't usually correlate. I don't know how those rankings work.
I don't think anyone does. It's like, yeah, so yeah, it's just somehow we have to decide that this is a good thing. I gave up after a while. It was like, oh, you know, now it's a, you know, it's a nice little sort of email to say, yes, you've had this many sales or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, what would be, you know, and this is the thing. Obviously, the promotion is part of the book as well, as getting it out there and really sort of making people aware of it. You know, and what do you, you know, what would be, you know, really what you'd love for this book to do for you and for your life, and you know, what would you like it to lead to?
You know, I don't want to be famous. I don't need to be famous, but I would love for my book to be something that people just know about, and accessible to the world, and accessible, you know, to I haven't been able to get it in a library yet, and I would really like that. My book is self-published, and so that makes it a little bit harder, because not only am I the author, I'm the marketing director and the publisher and all the other things in between. And so it makes it really tricky. And, you know, a library doesn't want a book that that is by a nobody who published it herself. And but I really do. I really, you know, I just want somebody that is famous enough to pick up my book so that they can tell the world, like, hey, this is a good book. And it you know, I think it's less about my story and more about my writing. Like I want to be a good author, and I want my words to mean something to someone, not necessarily because of the story or my life experiences, but I think I just want to be a good author.
What what is it about a good author? What would that do for you? What is that? What is
I
that?
don't know. It's, you know, I would say, like, as I was getting closer to publishing my book, I realized for the very first time after 41 years of life that being a writer was something I always wanted to be, but I didn't quite know that. My last chapter of my book, I touch on that. I touch on, you know, being a sophomore in high school in my English class, and my English teacher hating every single thing I ever wrote, and how it was like just like so grating for me, because it meant so much to me to be able to write things. And I actually just recently had this memory of being in elementary school, and we had this author in residence come, and she did this like a week-long workshop, and I got to be a part of it. And I just felt like that was such a special, you know, she could have been the president to me. and so I, you know, in getting to the point of publishing, I was realizing how impactful being a writer meant to me. I mean, and so I don't know necessarily like where that came from. I have a degree in biology, you know. I didn't set out to be a writer. I don't know all the proper grammar things and all of the ways that you're supposed to or not supposed to write. I just do it. And I guess it's, when it comes down to it, it's the feeling that it gives me. And so, you know, since I have published my book, I've dabbled in like writing a couple of really short fiction things, and have kind of put them out in the universe. I haven't I've gotten one very short thing published, but that's it. And I have a little idea of a novel in my head, but I don't dare let it out yet because I don't really know what's going to happen when I do. But I don't know. I guess it took me this long to realize that this is a path that I really have wanted all along. Isn't that silly?
I hear it scary amount of times, people sort of saying, they went on this massive detour called life, to really come back to what they really wanted to do, or what things really meant, and if it is writing, and for whatever reason we got deflected and distracted, and all these things, and what scares me more is that there's a lot of people never get back. They never tap into what that was, or they write it off and say it's too late, and it's just not meant to be, or whatever, right? We just the opportunity never returns, and that to me is tragic.
Absolutely. Well, and I think one of the things that I did learn through writing my stories down is that the universe always had a way of guiding me to what I needed. And with very little effort on my part, I think that I have been able to do so many things and have had so many different opportunities and adventures. And I think so much of it has just come very easily. And I don't know if that's that whole belief of things happen for a reason. And so I just am able to sort of like guide through the flow of a natural path or what have you. But I think that so many things have just like landed in front of me, and I've been able to just kind of ride that wave and go along with it. And learned, oh wow, that is a really remarkable thing, or that is really a wonderful thing, or I'm so glad that that is a part of my life now. And I think so much of that has just been my willingness to just go with it, and not really fight the things that are in front of me, and really sort of dip my toes in opportunities that are there, whether I think I want them or not.
Mm. I'm curious what you were saying with that sort of potential other novel, a piece of work that you don't dare let it out yet. I mean, is that part of the process for you, or is that you sort of almost being curious / scared of your own capabilities and powers?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think probably a little bit of both. I think that, for one, being a little bit scared of, I don't really know how to write a story that's not mine, perhaps. But also being sort of, I think that the moment I start to write it, it's going to consume me. And that is okay, but it's also not okay. I have a family and a life that needs to continue to keep moving and flowing, and so I need to figure out, I suppose, how to make room for it, so that I can begin that journey. I'm hoping, we've got our summer school break coming up, and we have a big road trip planned, and so I'm thinking of maybe starting to let it out a little bit then and see what happens. But also, I think that there's definitely some nerves in the fact that I don't really know what I'm doing. I haven't been schooled in this, and am I going to spend a bunch of energy and think this, like, look at this really cool thing I have, and it's not actually really cool.
It's like someone said to me with podcasting, when I have zero podcasting, I don't know where you go to podcast school or whatever, but it's one of the things where people just keep turning up, and you turn it with energy and purpose and passion. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you went to the school or not, because people can have more passion and purpose than those that were sort of educated and decided and said, this is my thing, or thought this would be a good thing to turn up to. I think for me, the most common answer with fire in the belly is passion.
Yeah.
we have for what we do, then, you know, if there's grammatical mistakes, then get somebody who's good at grammar, you know, if there's whatever.
Yeah.
It's, to me, that's the passion, and that's probably, you know, really what I'm picking up from you, I suppose. It's that thing of going, listen, just, you got to do whatever it takes, you know, and it's not, if you think about it, you know, if you think about it, you'll stop yourself in so many ways, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
What, I mean, for you now, looking back, you know, is there anything you would have done different? Is there anything you could have done different, do you think? Or again, is it just, you know, you're saying that was part of the journey, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, I mean, you can always look back and say, maybe I could have done something differently. Um, but that doesn't really serve me. And so I, at this point, I don't think that there's anything that I would look back on and do differently. I have made it a very purposeful journey of mine to not let myself regret things. And so in my life, I've learned to make decisions and react to things in a way to avoid that. And I think because I have in my younger years have regretted things, and that's just like one of the worst feelings, I think, because it's an emotion that you have based off of something you likely didn't do, right? um and and so I have learned to motivate myself in ways to not allow that. Like there's no space for um looking back and wishing I did something else, because I'm going to do everything that I can to 100% right now. And then that's all there is, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what would be your strengths? I mean, what would you say if you were trying to describe yourself on paper? I mean, what are Ryan's amazing strengths and qualities and values?
Um, very stubborn. I think that um, meaning that I am somebody that will try my best and give my full effort into things, and rely on myself and my own independence as much as I can. Which then can also get me into trouble because there are lots of things that I can't do. And I've had to learn that too. And, back to like, unleashing your greatest strengths through your vulnerabilities. Like I've had so many moments in my life where I've had to stop and ask for help, and like physical help, like, can you help me? I fell on the floor. And also just, emotional help, or, other sorts of types of help. Um, and so I suppose then, looking at some of the strengths I have, I think is the ability to reflect and to value the perspective that I have about myself and about the world and about what I do in the world and how I contribute to the world. Um, I remember I was probably still a teenager at the point when I had this like epiphany for myself, where I learned that however you see something is exactly what it is. And so, you look at this flower blooming on this tree, and whatever, it's beautiful and it's fragrant and it's wonderfully orange and whatever. And that's what it is to you. And the person standing next to me may not see that. They may see that their allergies are flaring and that it's causing them great strife, and so then that's their reality, that's their perspective of that same event. And it doesn't matter how they see it, it matters how you see it, and how you see that anything, that's your reality. And it doesn't matter who else shares that.
I mean, that's so powerful, right? The fact that, you know, your truth is your truth, and as you say, that's your reality. It just is, and my truth is mine, and there is potentially the truth as well out there as well, but we all have our own perspective. So vis-a-vis on that, then you know, if you can change your truth, you can change your reality, right?
Hmm.
Which is huge.
I think so.
It's for you, I mean, getting this book out, I mean, is there more memoirs, do you think? I mean, is it, or do you think this is, you know, you said everything you need to say in this chapter of your life as such at this time?
You know, I don't know. My mother-in-law keeps joking about my next memoir and how it's going to be about how not to roll over your kids or something like that. But I think at this point, I think in terms of writing a full length uh, book memoir, I don't think I have one more in me. I don't think I do. However, I mentioned I've been writing shorter pieces and things, and I've been writing a lot of um, like memoir or creative nonfiction short stories, just little blurbs of things that have happened or based on things that have happened, and that I enjoy, um, because that's easy. That's what I know, and that's um, also, I think that I represent a community of people that don't always have a voice in terms of being a part of the disabled community. And so to be able to offer a little bit of a voice in that realm, in like a short piece or something, that makes me feel good. I mentioned that I had a small publication. I had like a microfiction piece that was published, and it was 150 words, and it was about one of the first times that I had actually um, driven myself to, I was going to Dairy Queen, an ice cream shop. And it was like, I was by myself and I was going to do it, and I was going to get my chair out of the car. And I was very proud of this moment, and I had it all planned out. And I pulled up into the handicap spot, and I was about to get my chair out when this woman knocked on my window, and I rolled it down, and she said, "You can't park there. That's a disabled spot." And, I was 16, and what I should have done was told her that I deserved to park there and explain, but I didn't. I said, "Okay, thanks, ma'am." And I actually pulled away and I parked somewhere else, and I got myself out of the chair, out of the car, put my wheelchair together, and went and got my ice cream, And so it's just like little things like that. And it deserved a story, and it deserved somebody to see that perspective, I think.
Yeah. Well, isn't that funny? And you know how, I don't know, somebody to even come up and say that. I mean, it's, you know, I don't know.
Because I could possibly need that spot, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's how presumptuous, and it's crazy that somebody would have that, you know. And I don't know about there, but I know here there's a lot of advertising campaigns and so saying, you know, not all disabilities are visible, you know, and
Right.
you know, so it's a mixture of both, right?
Yeah, and and often I sit with sort of wondering, like, what is the better, the fact that I have this the very visible physical disability. It makes it easy for people to give me the grace, I suppose. But in the same respect, then, people are also very presumptuous, or I guess expect certain things or don't expect things. But then people with what you would consider more of an invisible disability, how hard is that? When there's somebody that rightfully so is parking in that handicap spot, but then you can't really, you know, visibly see why, and then they get ridiculed because of it. And so, gosh, it's hard for everybody, isn't it?
Oh, totally. I mean, it's that. I mean, I suppose in the moment, you know, there's a lot of, you know, sort of focus on mental health, and it's just that, you know, it's like people don't necessarily have the physical disability, but certainly the sort of emotional. It's not a disability per se, but it's they've got a, you know, mental illness, or they've got mental health to deal with, you know. So it's
Mhm.
I mean, it's random question on that. Which would you rather? Would you rather have your mental health or your physical health? I mean, what do
I
you?
would absolutely rather have my mental health.
which is amazing, right?
Yeah.
That's, it allows you to cope or cater for anything right then, you know.
Yeah. I mean, but then you think about it, if you don't have your physical health, guess where your mental health is going?
Mm, yeah, yeah.
Because I've had many occasions in my life where my physical health has been taken away. And there's a chapter in my book where I've spent 8 months on bed rest by myself in my own single family home by myself, and have like a home health care nurse that pops in on occasion, but for the most part I'm just laying there. And that's the most dead I've ever felt. And that's the most depressed I've ever felt. And so, when you don't have your physical health, I don't think you have anything really.
Mm. For you, I mean, did it ever get to the stage where your mental health just wasn't there, and it's something you've had to work on as well, or have you?
During that during that moment, yeah, absolutely. The chapter is called "Said the Spider" because um, I started talking to a spider on the wall, um, and and I don't actually know if that's true or not. I don't know if I got to that point, but in my head I did. Um and it got really, I all I wanted to do was sleep. I didn't really want to be awake because I couldn't really do anything. I didn't want visitors because I mentioned they come and bring their pity muffins and then they get to walk away and go back to their lives. And it was a really, really down time for me. But one thing that happened during that time is I started dreaming about swimming every night. And that was the one thing during the day I looked forward to, was sleeping so that I could dream about swimming, which is like wild. But what that did for me is it really ignited sort of reignited a passion for swimming in me. And so once I was actually well enough, um, by my standards, not by medical standards, I started to sneak out of my house and go swimming. In that really, that changed me in so many ways because it kind of gave me that passion back for swimming, and it gave me something to try for. And I in one of those little secret swims that I had, I learned that I really had a lot of my own personal swimming goals that I still had yet to conquer. And so I like made a promise to myself sitting there in the pool one day that I was going to compete again, and I was going to try my hardest, and I was going to see what happened, and be sort of like the poster child for what happens when you put 100% of yourself into something. What can you actually accomplish? And that was something that I did. And um, so I forced myself out of that depression, and I forced myself out of those moments where it was like I had gotten to the point where I wasn't living, and I knew that. But to get to that point, I really was able to kind of go full circle and come out of it because I knew what that other side felt like. And so once I was well enough and once I was on the mend, I I was re-impassioned by life, and everything was so um, beautiful and colorful, and the sun was always shining and the birds were always chirping. It's like my whole vision of the world um, was reignited.
Have you visualized this moment previously? Had you seen this book created, and are you sort of having this outlook and where you are today? Has this happened before for you?
I mean, I think so. Yeah. And I think that, and that's one of the things that I guess makes me not just like everybody else, is that I'm constantly thinking about the things that have happened in my life and what they do or do not do for me, and what I can learn from them, and how I can grow from them, and how I can share the things that I've learned with others. And I mean, that's something that has always been a very big part of me.
Hmm. Is sharing important to you? Do you get power from sharing, or is it are you someone that can inwardly reflect by yourself?
I think that sharing is really important to me. And I think that's why I've chosen the careers that I've had. I've been a high school teacher and a swim coach. And I think that those have been sort of really easy avenues for me to connect with younger people and not only like share my experiences, but um, especially the things that those vulnerable things and the things that aren't necessarily talked about as much, and to show kids, especially like high school age, that that things get icky sometimes, and you have the power to make choices and to move forward. And and so being a teacher and a swim coach has given me a really slick way for me to connect with kids. And and that's always been more powerful than the you know they remember the parts of the cell, or if they get their best time, just being able to have those connections, and to be not only somebody that I would consider a role model, but also somebody that would consider um, somebody that they can talk to and feel comfortable with.
Hmm. Who does inspire you? Who's your inspiration?
I've been asked that before. And I don't know that I have, it's not like I have my 8-year-old, his hero right now is Jane Goodall, and he just did a presentation all about Jane Goodall, and it was really, really sweet. And I remember, things like that as a kid, but I never really had, that one person that I really looked up to, or was like my hero, I suppose. And so maybe that's for better or for worse. Maybe that's me taking little bits of different people unknowingly, and creating um, the person, that doesn't necessarily exist for me, that I want to emulate, or am inspired by. I don't know. I don't have I've never really had that one person. I didn't, as a kid, I wasn't writing letters to Walt Disney, or, things like that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm inspired by many people in a lot of ways. And um, I also want to be my best person. And so I pay a lot of attention to that. I've always, thought about if there is something, a quality or something that I admire in a person, I will be quick to look at that and think about, why do I admire that? Is that something that I lack? Or is that something that just means a lot to me? Is that something that I can work more towards? Or is that something that I need to investigate harder on? And so just being very mindful, I suppose, of if there are moments of things that I am inspired by, well, why does that inspire me? Does that inspire me because it's something that I myself don't possess? And then what do I do from there?
Mm. It's quite a lot of self-reflection there, actually to take that and, to see, to be able to, and not everyone can see it, and seeing that, are there things, are we having emotions or feelings about other people, and saying, well, what does that really mean about me? It's because
Mhm.
it's very easy to say, well, they have this and they have that, or whatever. Whereas actually the real question is, I think, as you beautifully said there, is that simply what am I seeing in them that I'm not seeing in myself, or whatever else,
Mhm.
That's very reflective. Have you always been able to be reflective, or is it taken, sort of coaches, counseling, etc., to be able to reflect and see yourself?
I think that my accident started that for me, um, most likely because I had a past and I had a present, and they didn't mesh. I from my accident, I don't remember anything from that night. And so it was very easy for me to kind of separate those two lives. I had my life before, and then I had my life after, which I think that it served me well, because I wasn't going to dwell too much on things. But then it also, gave me the insight that I did have this sort of time spectrum of before and after. And so I think that it it sort of without meaning to gave me a way to reflect. And I also think being in a wheelchair allowed me to pay attention more to the world and to myself. I think because, just, simply speaking, like being in a wheelchair, you have to consider the world around you at every given moment, because you have to, if you go to a new building or something, you need to see, well, can I fit through the doors? Are there stairs? Is there going to be a ramp for me? So just like little things, little very specific things like that. But then that also, I think, very quickly translates into the rest of your life, and so then you become very observant about your emotions and your mental state and things like that, just because, I'm constantly doing that in my physical world. And so I think it would be hard not for it to translate in all parts of my life.
I've sort of heard that before. It's almost like people's your weakness becomes your strength. As you say, it's that the reduction of one capacity increases the sensitivity of others, right? So, which I think makes sense. So you become hyper alert to certain things. You strengthen yourself up, which I'm kind of wondering is like, part of almost this writing, is it like, that's kind of in a weird way, it's the journey you've gone on, which has now reintroduced writing for you to allow your creativity to come out to, is creativity your purpose? Do you know your purpose?
I don't think you probably asked me this last time and I probably did the same thing. I don't think that, I think it's more important to pay attention to what you're doing in the moment, and how you're doing it in the moment, rather than looking at it in a more global sense. Like, is this my purpose? Is this, the life that I'm leading? Is this why I exist? Is this my identity? I think it's far more powerful and meaningful to just look at the right now. Like, right in this very instance, am I living up to my potential? Am I living my life in a way that is meaningful to me and using my skills in the best way, and kind of going from there? Because that's one thing that you're not guaranteed, is you're not guaranteed another moment, the next moment. And so trying to define your being in a global sense, and that's really paying attention to the future a lot, and that's something that's not really guaranteed. And so looking at my purpose, I don't know what my purpose is, but am I doing everything that I want to right now and being the best me that I can be right now? Then that's what matters, right?
Absolutely. I think, being present, not trying to sort of manage the future or manage the past or be anything but, and just saying it just is, and your situation is your situation, full stop.
Mhm.
There's and I can't help but think, there's so many people in life that are absolutely, they're the weight of the past and the weight of the future just doesn't allow them to be present really now at all, and that's sad, I find, but
It is. It's a waste.
mm,
It's a waste of their now.
yeah, yeah, well, that's it, so oh, it's beautiful, it's beautiful. So so you're just give us a bit of a guide to the book. So your book's written in parts as well as chapters, so give us a
Mhm.
background to that. What's your thinking?
It's funny, when I first separated it into parts, I was going to do it based off of the lessons that were learned. And so I had it in 3 parts, and like the first one was all about like acceptance, and then the second part was more about like self-reflection. But then it got really convoluted because it was definitely not in chronological order. And so then I kind of went back through it, but then I left the parts there because they really are separate parts of my life. And I don't, it's not like part one is from 0 to 20 and then 20 to 30. It's not that way. It's just in my mind and my process of sort of like understanding my life, those parts are there very, very intentionally, and they were very different parts of my life. And I can't necessarily tell you why, but they are different. And I also, in terms of just like reading and writing, I always enjoy having different sections and different parts, in terms of just being able to read through different things and kind of, okay, well, that's this part. And then you can kind of look at it as one big picture once it's over and kind of reflect on that, or think about, what you learned from that, and then move on to the next.
Yeah. Tell me, what sort of author are you? Are you sort of go to a dark room and type out like a crazy on a typewriter, or you sort of write it out, or what do we find? Where was the creative Ryan?
So a lot of this was actually written, it was all edited, sitting in a rocking chair, holding my baby while he slept and took his nap, and I sat and would just type away or edit away. Anymore now, because I have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old at home, my writing is spurts. So it's like spurts of 20 minutes while they're reading or playing. And I've gotten really, really good at that, I think, because that's the time I have. And so I use that time really well. And I can go from, I haven't written in 3 days and then get right back into the sentence I was in and right back into the moment. I've been able to really sort of get my brain like on straight, for that 20-minute rush. And then it's gone, it's whatever. Yeah, I think that, most of my earlier writing was sitting for 4 hours at a coffee shop somewhere with headphones on and kind of nobody else in the world around me. But that's not, my life doesn't exist like that right now. And I'm not going to get those moments, at least for another few years. And so I'm going to write in whatever way that my life will allow me. And I have learned that I enjoy writing just a little bit every day, whether that's, a blog post or a piece that I'm working on or an article, whatever the case may be. And it may be things that like they never actually get out into the world, and that's okay too, because it's fueling something, and it's fulfilling a need of mine that I haven't paid attention to in my previous years.
Wow. Yeah, it's a powerful journey, and I literally tip my hat to you for taking that journey and having the strength and bravery to do it, because it's do you believe everyone has a book in them, or what's your view for other potential authors?
I think that I mean, certainly everybody has a story. Um, and I would challenge people to sit down and figure out what their story would be. Because I think that a lot of people would be surprised by the answer, because a lot of times the things that are the most important or the most poignant aren't the biggest explosions in your life or the biggest, um, blockbuster moments. They're much smaller than that. And that's really amazing to actually be able to think on. And I think that is something that I really appreciate from my writing.
Well, so tell us, if you can summarize your fire in your belly in a couple of words, Ryan, what would they be now?
Oh, I think that, well, one thing that it will always be is to be a good mom. And through this, I never really thought about my kids paying much attention to my book or my writing. But since my book has come out, my 8-year-old has been writing his own books a little bit, and for Mother's Day, he wrote this poem, and he wrote that I was famous in it, which was really sweet and not true. And he had to write a list of his heroes, and I was one of them, which was really amazing. And so that was, that wasn't something that I thought about, like, hey, if I publish this book, maybe my kid will think I'm pretty cool. Like that wasn't part of it, but that is a really amazing impression of the power of unleashing one's story and one's words. And I think that, at a young age, at 8, he sees that that is something to really look up to and respect. And by goodness, I'm not going to let him read my book for several years, but I think that just like the power that he sees in that is really amazing. And so that's, obviously, like, just being a mom, for one, that's like a huge passion of mine, and being the best version of that. But I didn't actually think that the part of the author of that coincided with being a mom as much as it has. And that's been really, really neat. And yeah, and I think that that probably is encouraging me to want to continue writing a little bit. And I think that there are stories inside of me that have yet to be written. And I think there are reflections that I've had that I would like to continue to share with the world in one form or another, whether that be through a novel or some more memoir type things. But yeah, I feel like I'm just getting going, and I couldn't imagine being anything different right now. And so I think that that's the fire in my belly, is that I know I'm on the right path when I can't imagine it any other way.
And neither should you try to be anything other than what you're doing. So, well done to you. But give us a proper shout out where people can actually get the book. So to remind everyone, so the title is When I Grow Up, I Want to Be a Chair, a memoir by Rae Harbuck. Where it's available? Where can we get it? What's the best point of contact for people?
It is available worldwide on Amazon, and you can get it paperback or Kindle ebook. It is a part of Kindle Unlimited for those of you listening that may be a member of that. You can also order it where any books are sold, but the easiest place is certainly Amazon.
Perfect. Ryan, I thank you for your time. I salute you for having it out there. It's wonderful to have it, and I'm wonderful to have a copy here. So,
well, thank you, Pete. Thank you for sharing, and letting me be a part of your journey.
Indeed. So until the next time, I look forward to having you on when the next book's coming out. And
let's do it.
again, so listen, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you sharing. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks.